Hi, I'm Jim from jimthebikeguy.com, and I'm here today just to talk to you about punctures, tyres, tubes, things like that, but mostly punctures and how to fix them. A lot of people have a problem with this. They find it quite difficult to get the tyre on and off, and they find it quite difficult to get the tube back in and things like that. But there is a principle. There's two actually. So the things I always stick to are space creation. So you're looking all the time to introduce slack into the tyre, and there's a way of doing that, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And the second one, which a lot of people don't know or don't remember, which is always finish at the valve, just there. So people quite often, when they're doing the process of refitting a new inner tube, putting the tyre back on, they start working that way around and they try and finish here, and it really doesn't work. So let's go through it. So I'm going to imagine that I've got a puncture and I've taken the wheel off of my bike, as you can see here. So the first thing I'm going to do is some space creation. I'm going to introduce some slack into the system, which is handy in this case because these are Continental tyres, which are extremely good, but they are notoriously tight to get on and off. That's a good thing, by the way. You want a nice tight tyre. But these are frequently tyres that people wrestle with. So I'm going to start by going around, and hypothetically you might be stood in a lay-by in the rain now doing this. Apologies for that, but trust me, it's about less haste, more speed. So by pinching the tyre all the way around and dropping it down into the well in the middle of the rim, which is basically a way of making the wheel smaller, because there's a recess in there, and if you can get the tyre into that recess, all of a sudden there's a lot of slack in the system. Okay, so I'm going to grab my tyre levers from this drawer here. As a general rule, try and carry 3, but 2's not too bad. Starting opposite the valve, okay? You're going to get the hook of your tyre lever well under your tyre there like that. Open it up. And at this point, what a lot of people try and do, which quite often results in skinned knuckles or lost fingernails, is they do this. You know what? Don't do that if you can help it. People try and force that around there. You're more likely to knife a hole in the tube, which you want to save that inner tube if you can. You're probably going to damage the bead. You're probably going to damage the edge of your wheel as well by doing that. So in reality, what you really want to do is get a second lever, work it open. And if you find this initial part hard, do some more space creation. Go back around the tyre, pinch it, and you can hear it dropping in to the bead all the way around, like that. You get to here, you'll now find you can do that. And at that point, take your levers out. Okay. And carefully run your fingers all the way around the inside, like that. You really only need to take one side off, and it's surprising how many people, when they are fixing a puncture at the roadside by popping a tube in, take both sides of the tyre off. You don't need to do that at all. So let's imagine that this tube in here now is punctured, okay, for whatever reason. So before we do anything else, we've got to take it out, and we've got to take it out at the valve first. So you've got no choice here but to be fairly rough, fairly robust with your fingers. Pull the tyre back, get hold of it, drag it out, drag the valve out like that, and then just work your way around. Take it out. Quite often you'll find, this is a good demonstrator actually, you will find if your tube has been inside that tyre for some time, sometimes it almost fuses with the tyre, especially if it's been repaired like that. So you can see this has got a previous patch there. It looks like somebody's done a perfectly decent job, but the glue around the patch had fused its way onto the tyre. Don't worry about it, it's got to come out. So give it a good pull, get it all the way out. And what we'll do, I think, at this point is decide whether this tube can be saved. So we're going to pop that wheel just there for a second. You might do this at the roadside, or you might just take the tube home with you and do it later. But I think for the sake of not littering and for the sake of not saving the environment, if you like, I think it's important that you keep the tube. So roll it up, put it in your back pocket of your jersey or in your rucksack or whatever, take it home. Later on, decide if you want to keep it. And the way to do that is quite simply, is find the puncture. So put some air into it with your pump, like that. And then just have a good listen. Find out where the puncture was from when you were out earlier on, and then patch it. And we'll cover that in a separate video. Patching inner tubes is not difficult, but it's worth covering that in a separate video. So for the sake of today, we're going to imagine that you've now done that, or you just pulled a new tube out of your back pocket, because a sensible rider, generally speaking, goes out with 2 tubes, possibly even 3. So this is now, I'm just going to let the air out of that. So this is now my new tube, okay? So this is the one that I either just fixed at the roadside, or it's the one I just pulled out of my back pocket. Great, we've got that ready to go. But I'm going to hang that up here, because before I go whacking that new tube back in the wheel, I'm going to ask myself, why did I get a puncture? And this is quite important, because the biggest mistake, if you like, that you can make in a rush, especially if it's that rainy lay-by situation where, you know, it's a filthy, horrible day, your mates are waiting for you, you just want to get home, take an extra 30 seconds to check exactly why it was that you got a puncture. So I'm going to grab my wheel and my tyre again, exactly as we left it. And at this point, I'm going to carry out a bit of an inspection on it, and I'm going to make those guys wait because I don't want to get 30 metres down the road and have yet another puncture, because that really sucks, that's really demoralising. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to start by eyeballing the outside of the tyre, and I'm literally looking for foreign objects. So a hawthorn, a flint, a piece of broken glass. If it is going to be one of those things, do watch your fingers. It's really important. It sounds obvious, but you can do that and very easily go, ow. So look for the foreign object, to look for the reason that you had the puncture. It's a good chance to inspect whether your tyres are still roadworthy at the same time, handily. So I can see that this one is. I mean, this tyre is not that old. It's got plenty of tread. It's got plenty of thickness. There's no cords coming out of it. The bead isn't failing. The logos are still good. The rubber isn't perishing and cracking when I do that. So these are all good things to do at the point where you had a puncture. Okay, so I can see there's nothing on the outside of the tyre. The other thing I really want to do is look to the inside. So if we have a good look down there, that's what the inside of a tyre looks like. And handily, you can see the point there, look, where that previous puncture repair had welded itself to the inside of the tyre. So at this point, using a good bit of daylight or natural light, I'm going to do exactly the same as what I just did, but I'm going to do it for the inside of the tyre. So I'm literally just looking for stuff inside, finding what it was that made its way through. If there is a foreign object in there, like I mentioned to you earlier, a thorn, you know, a shard of flint, something like that, depending on where you live, you've got to get it out. You've really got to get it out. And so for that, you might need a pick or a tool of some description. But it's really important that you get that out before you put a new tube in, because quite clearly, if you don't, you're just going to ride off down the road and immediately get another puncture. If you can't find any foreign object, but you still had a puncture, it's probably because it wasn't a foreign object that caused it, it was the tube itself failing. And there's a million reasons why that might be. It may have failed at the valve, you may have hit a pothole and got what we call a pinch flat, or snake bite puncture if you like, where effectively the tube was just crushed and that was enough to compromise it. So not every puncture is caused by something physically stabbing through the tyre. Sometimes the tube itself was the puncture, if you like, or the valve gave up, or it just burst. Sometimes that happens, unfortunately. So that's why we then inspect the tube, which we did earlier, and we decided whether it was saving. So by doing this bit of detective work across the tube and that, you can work out what type of puncture you had and you can solve it. Okay, so we're at that point now where we're thinking, right, we're happy, I've got a tube I can use, I've got a tyre I can use, we know we're good, my mates are all waiting, coffee shops at the end of the road. What we really want to do is get a tube in there and get moving. So the principle of what we're about to do is exactly the opposite of what we did earlier. We're going to do it in reverse. So here's my tube. There's the valve hole there in the rim, and you can see that just there. Get that valve, stick it down through there like that, give it a bit of a press so plenty of it emerges underneath. And at this point now, I generally find it's better to put the wheel on the floor. So I've got the wheel on the floor now. I find this works better because it gives you the support that you need if you like to do the next part. The first part of this job now is using my hands and working in both directions at the same time away from the valve. I'm just going to feed that tube in. This is the bit that quite a lot of people find fiddly, and I have to admit, so do I. There's not really an elegant way of doing this, but all you've got to do really is make sure that at the end of doing this part now, you've kind of got as much of the tube inside the wheel as possible. So I'm literally getting the last bit in like that. Okay, so you can see the tyre is still off, but the tube is inside, and we're just aiming to get that done. Right, now the most important part, and this goes back to the principles I spoke to you about at the start of the video, which is always introduce some space creation, introduce some slack into the system, and always finish at the valve. So if I started where I am now, I'd get this very badly wrong, because by the time I got around there and tried to get that bit of the tyre back on, I won't be able to. So I'm going to turn the wheel over. Back to that thing I said earlier, I'm going to finish at the valve. Okay, valve's down there. This is my start point. Quite simply, using my hands, I'm going around. And at the minute, it's really easy. It's really, really easy at the minute because there's loads and loads and loads of slack in the system. But as I get down here somewhere, I'm going to find it starts to get much, much, much harder. Somewhere around here, you can see I'm sort of at 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock, if you like, if that was 12 o'clock at the valve. So usually what I do around about now is I stop and I go back around the wheel and do that thing again, give it a pinch, go around, give it a pinch, and that introduces a load of slack back into the system. And hey presto, when I get to here, all of a sudden, it's not as hard anymore, okay? And you can do it again if you want. You can go back around. And the other reason that giving it this pinch is really useful is it buries the tube down inside the wheel and stops it from getting trapped when you inflate it. So it's a double whammy. So again, going back round, and I've literally got barely anything left to do. If you're really, really, really lucky at this point, you might get it back on with your thumbs. I have a feeling here now that I would be able to. However, I'm going to do it with a lever just to show you how to do this next part. So kneel down, get hold of it like that. And this is the bit where you've really got to be careful not to trap the tube, which is hiding away in there now somewhere. Keep your thumb just there like that. Keep that little bit there of tyre held, okay? And then work your way in this direction and pop that tyre on the rim. 1, finishing at the valve. 2, happy days, okay? And because I love it so much, I'm going to go around one more time and I'm going to give it another pinch. I really can't emphasise that part enough. Space creation all the way around it to create slack in the system and also to stop that tube getting trapped. Should we inflate the tyre? Now, I'm going to cheat. I've got a compressor. You've probably got a handheld pump or maybe a CO2 cartridge if you're lucky. one way or the other, you've got to get the thing pumped up. Okay, we're nearly there. The last part that you really need to do is look and see, did the tyre seat properly? So specifically, all the way around, did it pop up and engage with the side of the wheel and hook in properly, if that makes sense? And the way you can tell that is you've got this line. I don't know if you can see that, but effectively I'm running my finger around there and there's a line, guide, all the way around. It's about 5mm thick. And if I can see that all the way around, and the same goes if I flip the wheel around, I can see it here. And you can also spin the wheel and ask yourself, does it look egg-shaped or does it look round? Effectively, that's it. We're done. So the only other small thing which is worth talking about, and it is something that people ask me about from time to time, is these things. So we've got to press the valve cap, and we've got a valve lock ring. So generally speaking, these things here, they go there like that. The idea being to secure the valve stem in place. It's debatable whether you need to have these or not, because as you can see, if I take it off and drop it, the valve is exactly where it needs to be, and it's supported in place by its own pressure anyway. And the worry with having those on is quite often what I find is people have threaded them on, and they've threaded them on so hard they've actually ripped the valve clean through the side of the wheel. So have a think, if you are going to fit them, and by all means you can have them, if you are going to fit them, don't over tighten them is the most important part. So we're going to close the valve down, and then we're going to go on to valve caps. Now these are a particular bugbear because it's debatable again whether you need them. There are several problems with these. They have a nasty habit of splitting and then getting spat out into gutters and places like that, where effectively they're contributing to plastic waste in the countryside, and so there's an environmental issue there, however small that may be. The other issue with them is they actually can trap dirt and water. So people think that by having it on the end of there like that, it's protecting the valve core and the mechanism, if you like. But the counter argument would be, on a wet day, all that really wants to do is store dirt and water inside there, which then, conversely enough, can actually cause the valve core to seize solid. I'll leave it to you to decide whether you want to use lock rings and valve caps or not. It's entirely a personal choice thing. Generally speaking, I take them off. Anyway, as regards refitting that tyre, fixing that puncture safely, I think that's a job well done, and hopefully that's a method that will work for you. I hope this video has been useful and informative. If there are any comments or questions, do put them in the comments below. Other than that, thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.